my parents gave me the name Fitzgerald because my mother's family, she has all sisters, and so they're all losing the Fitzgeralds in the family. That leg of the Fitzgeralds was gone. And when I was born, she asked my dad, "Do you mind if I name him? If we name him after my family name instead of Rodriguez?" And my dad, being a totally chill dude, was like, "Sure, why not?"
That was journalist and native San Franciscan Joe Fitzgerald Rodriguez. I'm Jeff. Welcome to Storied San Francisco, a weekly podcast where San Franciscans from all walks of life share their stories, and you get to know your neighbors. In this podcast, Joe traces his family's story back to a chance meeting between his mom and his uncle down in Los Angeles. The two hitchhiked back to his uncle's home in San Francisco, where Joe's mom met his dad, and the rest is history. Joe shares stories of how he came into journalism as a middle school student. He takes us through his high school days, when he detoured into filmmaking, and his time at City College, where he rediscovered his love of reporting. Here's Joe.
My dad, Joe Bill Rodriguez. So we're both Joes, although I'm not a junior because I'm a Fitzgerald. My dad, a bit of a pothead, bit of a punk kid, a drummer, struggling to graduate high school at Galileo, right by Fisherman's Wharf. He's best friends with one of his brothers, Carlos. And Carlos was just a partier, man. Carlos, his older brother, just everywhere. And Carlos is down in Los Angeles, and Carlos is married. But he meets a really cool, super fun gal who he gets totally stoned with, named Joy Fitzgerald, who's 18, just escaped from Massachusetts. Her parents don't understand her, don't get her. She wants to get the hell out of the East Coast entirely. They're not supporting her education or her as a person. They're getting ready for her to be married or something, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so here she is escaping this kind of patriarchal whole deal. And as soon as she's in Los Angeles partying, hardying, meets Carlos. Carlos says, "Hey, you seem like a gal that would really like my brother Joe. You should come up with me to San Francisco. Let's get you two kids hanging out." And they hitchhike up just back to San Francisco because neither of them has a car or money enough really for a plane. And I think at one point, the way my mom tells it, if I remember correctly, a truck from what's the bagel shop on Geary right by Park Presidio? The Holy Bagel?
Yes.
Yes. A truck.
I'm like, I always see it driving, Joe. I'm gonna keep my eyes on the road. Come on.
At one leg of their journey closer to the city, a Holy Bagel truck helped them in. So
wow.
I always patronize Holy Bagel, and I just think of that every time. I don't want to tell them the story every time because I don't want to bore them to tears, but I'm like, I have Holy Bagel to thank partially for my existence.
That's wow.
And
That's awesome.
Yeah, she meets my dad and they hit it off. He's still in high school. She's kind of graduated, but they were together.
Wait, she's older?
Ever since. She's a little older, yeah.
Okay.
A little older. Yeah, by like maybe she was 19 actually, now that I think about it. She might have been 19 and he is 18. Or maybe she's 18 and he's 17. But they met and they never separated, and they were together until the day my dad died in 1996.
How long had your mom and Carlos known each other before they decided?
Yeah, not the hell long at all.
And
Carlos
your mom
was a very charismatic guy.
Right. And persuasive.
Yes. Come up to San Francisco. And she's like, I don't know anybody in California. Okay.
Exactly. But I mean, without knowing your mom, she had already uprooted herself away from her family. So like, what's another few hundred miles up the road?
Right. Yeah, there is that. There is totally that. Yeah. I wonder if that point, if my grandfather and grandmother were managing a building in San Francisco on Market Street. I know they did later in life. So if they did, I bet you kind of haggling over, hey, my parents might have a place for you to stay with good rent might have been a part of it.
Right.
I think about it.
some safety and some security in crazy San Francisco.
In crazy San Francisco. Can you believe this? My dad, at one point, and I don't know what point exactly this was, in his 20s, I believe, was a barista. He's just, slinging coffee at some cafe in the Mission. And he was a drummer. And he lived on 18th Street, right by Dolores Park.
Right.
Like kind of on the way to Bayreuth. Like, he lived right over there.
I bet it was still a little slummy then.
Right?
It is absolutely not now, and hasn't been for a while. But
Mark Zuckerberg lives on the other side of the park now.
Exactly. Wow. Well, let's that's a good point. So, your dad, and you said his parents owned some property. So, how long has your dad's family managed? Sorry. Yeah. How long has his family been in?
My grandfather moved. So, my dad had Carlos, Frankie, Tommy, three brothers, three older brothers. And just before my dad was born, or I'm sorry, just after my dad was born. My dad was born in Puerto Rico. Literally a week or two after my dad was born. They won some sort of sweepstakes. I've only ever heard it described as the sweep. I don't know if it was like a ticket at a liquor store or a raffle or a box top that they put in. They won some tens of thousands of dollars in some sort of sweepstakes. And they use the money to uproot the entire family and go, you know what? We're moving to California. And they moved to Reseda.
Okay.
And I love that they moved to Reseda because I love the Karate Kid. And that's where the Karate Kid is from. I had just made my brother watch the first two Karate Kid movies with me. He had never seen them. I feel like a failure. So my dad is in Reseda. He's like less than a month old. And my grandmother, who is just a little nutty, accuses my grandfather of cheating on her.
Okay.
No way. Frank Rodriguez, I'm leaving you. I'm leaving you.
Wow.
Couldn't speak good English at all. She always had this weird accent. And she's from Aruba. And she pulls my dad and just takes my dad, not any of the other brothers, takes my dad, goes up to San Francisco to stay with a friend. And my grandfather, Frank Rodriguez, who basically raised me when my dad died, my grandfather, Frank, chased her up to San Francisco where they stayed. And so I can't say my dad was born and raised in SF. He was only raised in SF since he was about a month old. And if it wasn't for my grandmother accusing my grandfather of cheating,
wow,
and just running up here and going, no,
there is so much
away from me, Frank,
to unpack there. And maybe if you want to talk anymore, but also maybe it's best to just
got back together and divorced and got back together. They're always very passionate.
Yeah.
Very passionate. And they ultimately stayed with each other until she died in 1994 or 95, one of the two.
I wonder what it was about San Francisco that made her come here, besides that it wasn't Reseda. Do you know?
I don't. I wish I did. So much of my family of my dad's side of the family has died or gone astray.
Yeah.
So my uncle Carlos, who would have the story a little better about my mom. My mom likes to exaggerate stories, so I've had to use journalism, verify.
Trust but verify.
Yes. They have a saying, if your mom tells you she loves you, trust but verify.
Right.
When it comes to my mom, anything she tells you, trust but verify.
Yeah.
Because she's just a natural born storyteller, which is is kind of where I hope rubbed off on me. She never lets the truth get in the way of a good story. So I learned that way to weave things from her, but early on I had to learn to make sure that all my facts were straight. Because when I'm verbally telling you a story, I'm like, yeah, there were 20 guys fighting me in that alley, and no, there's 2 guys.
Yeah, and I'm like, no, Joe, that was Karate Kid. Come on.
that was Mr. Miyagi. I had to unlearn that really quick in when learning journalism at first, and it was a bad habit to have, but I kicked it pretty good, I think. Carlos, who could have told me parts of the story, unfortunately died of AIDS in the 90s. My grandmother died of cancer the same year Carlos died.
Wow.
And then my dad, having been sober for some years, through my childhood, thankfully, hit the bottle again once his mother and brother, who were both collectively his best friends, was not. He went back on the bottle, and then a year or two later, he died. So it was, my early childhood was just funeral, and I think that shapes how I see the city a lot. Like, I have the old stories of them, and they are beloved, but they are also ghosts, and they're ghosts that I see everywhere in the city, wherever I go.
Yeah.
And so that informs a lot of how I view San Francisco through that emotional prism. And so my mother and my grandfather raised me after that.
Okay. Your grandfather, your dad's dad?
Mm-hmm.
Got it. Okay.
Frank. Yeah.
So they got along, your mom and your grandfather?
Oh yeah, they're
everything's
thick as thieves. They're thick as thieves, good friends. I mean, they supported each other so much after all that death. Like, you just imagine, there's just like, you basically lose like a third of your family in the span of a year or two. And and those were all the ones that lived in San Francisco. The rest of my dad's brothers all lived in, one lived back in Puerto Rico, and then one lived in Los Angeles.
Mm-hmm. Okay, well, so talk us through where in the city did you grow up?
Oh gosh, I grew up in the hard scrabble streets of the Cow Hollow, which, for those who don't know San Francisco very well, is part of the marina. And people's first reactions are like, oh, like the richest area and one of the richest areas in the city. And I'm like, yes, but for those who haven't been there a lot, and I don't blame you because it's an obnoxious neighborhood, Lombard Street is like a strip of poverty in the marina, and it's where all the slummy hotels are, and a lot of prostitution takes place there, a lot of drug deals. When my buddy first started as a cop, he was in the Northern District, which is basically the marina, and regaled me with tales of all sorts of slummery happening on Lombard, where we grew up. And my dad and mom got an apartment there from some friends of theirs who I believe later also died of AIDS. And but they got the apartment there because my mom got a job as a secretary in a law firm across the street. My dad worked at a hotel across the street. So, they're like, oh, you got financiers or something? No, my mom was a secretary and my dad is a hotel clerk. So I don't know what to tell you.
Yeah, hey, and good for them. That's walk to work. It's convenient. Good for the environment. So that is where you grew up. What was it?
And it's funny because it was. I really credit it with giving me this. It really awoke me to structures really early on, because like my three best friends in the neighborhood, one was housing rich because she was a multi-generational San Franciscan whose family owned a home in the marina, but her family was out of work and dirt poor, like absolutely cash poor. And my good buddy, whose family still lives in the marina now because they live in that same rent controlled apartment, his mom was on food stamps and overweight and not working. And my other good buddy, and the four of us had this group together. His dad was a San Francisco taxi driver and studying to be a teacher, and now he's a teacher in Sacramento. But so we all lived in this kind of like poor pockets of of the marina, and we would hang out in the cheaper places. Like there used to be Star Donuts, just like there is on Market now.
Yeah.
There used to be one on Chestnut, and in the middle of these fancy neighborhood, and we'd go there for our cheap donuts and milk and sit on the chairs outside and watch all the rich yuppies go by and just wonder at their lives and what it was like, and amaze and marvel at the differences between them and us,
the contrasts.
How
old would you have been in this scene that you're setting, like roughly?
Like junior high through high school.
Okay.
It was like our Friday night ritual. As soon as we're old enough to leave the house, and the marina is very walkable, like Clement Street, like Silver, like any neighborhood kind of corridor, market corridor, that you have in those neighborhoods, or like Irving or Terraval, and you could just kind of, everyone lives around the area. You walk down there, and it was just like a place where you really saw a split in how they lived and how we lived, and it very much like informed my worldview for a long time. I had that worldview split again in the disparities in my high schools. Although I will say it was in junior high when I got my first taste of journalism there in the marina. And here's another thing that's funny. So I often tell people I went to Marina Middle School, and people who haven't spent a lot of time in the city or maybe haven't had a chance to get acquainted with the school system go, "Oh, it's in the marina, so do a bunch of white kids go there?" And I laugh because like no, it's shaped by the buses. It's shaped by the Muni buses, and the two Muni buses that terminate right at Marina Middle School or nearby are, do you know
22.
them?
The 22 has got to be
22.
one of them.
22 is one of them.
Not the 2 Jackson, no.
And not
that's
the 2, but
far.
it terminates nearby, but not like right there.
Go ahead. I don't know.
The 30 Stockton.
Oh yeah, the Dirty 30.
The Dirty 30. So if you've got kids busing in on the 22 and the 30, where do you think they're coming from?
Chinatown. Western Addition.
Yeah, bada bing, you got it.
Okay.
That's where most of the kids are from.
Yeah.
And so you got a lot of kids of color there. You got a lot of low income kids all in.
When you were talking about sitting on that bench and noticing the contrast with your friends, I was going to say that's not even getting into writing Muni, especially the 22, and seeing those, the tour to San Francisco.
Yeah, and we were Muni kids too, right? Like as soon as we're in junior high, we're on Muni all the time. So we're like seeing the difference. Like, I mean, the Fillmore, Western Addition area, and the Presidio and Chinatown were the most adjacent neighborhoods to me. And I guess North Beach too, but for whatever reason, I guess I was more attracted to Chinatown. So if I was ever going that way, I'd probably end up in Chinatown.
Right.
And so those were the neighborhoods I spent the most time in while I was growing up.
You mentioned getting, I think this is what you said, first starting to get into journalism in junior high. I was going to ask, just kind of before we talk, like just kind of generally, what kind of kid were you? Like what kind of things were you into? I was a huge fucking nerd. You kidding? I was a huge fucking nerd. I was watching Star Trek and Quantum Leap when I was coming home from school and reruns. Scott Bakula, Scotty B, my man. I got it on Blu-ray. That was definitely feeding me a lot of thoughts about morality. They're great morality plays. And my buddies and I all like traded books. We had good books like American literature. Like my next door neighbor, his name was Bill Johansson, elderly man, even when I was a kid. So sadly he's gone now, but he had his own library in his house, and he was a socialist. He bequeathed me some of them. So I have them on my shelf right here. Nice.
The Intelligent Woman's Guide to Socialism and Capitalism.
Yes.
Karl Marx, his life and works. Got East of Eden, Dwight Eisenhower, Crusade in Europe. He had like all this great literature, and he introduced me to it when I was young, and so I'd pass it on to my friends.
And introduced you said, to socialism, or?
Like not really as much, like just the concept that it existed, but he didn't try to indoctrinate me or anything. And but he also had a typewriter, and so he introduced me to writing. And so it was thanks to Bill that I got like interested in actually writing things. And that led me to the Marina Middle School Penguin Press, which I still have right here.
Yes.
God, what year is this? This is Friday, December 17th, 1999. Is a broadsheet. It was the only broadsheet, which is a wider newspaper, for those who don't know, in junior high schools in San Francisco. And on the very front, I'll show you this, Willie Brown, me and Willie Brown hanging out.
Oh my God. And it even says the mayor.
It even says the mayor. Willie Brown was one of my first interviews ever for in journalism as a 11 or 12-year-old or whatever you are. So
That's so awesome.
yeah. So he was coming out of a mayoral forum, right? And he was coming out of our auditorium. And I remember I had a little reporter's notebook. They're slender, right? But just for those who don't know, the slender notebooks that fit in your back pocket. And I had my little slender notebook, and I came after him. I said, Mr. Brown, you got a second to speak to the school paper? And he says, oh my God, they make miniature versions of you vultures now. Straight up clowns a child.
What an endorsement, though. You're like, fuck yeah, I made it.
Like, yes, I am a vulture. I'm coming after you, Willie.
That's right. It's all dirt. Get ready.
That's right.
Wow.
Years later, I cracked him up with his own joke when I re-met him as an adult, and it was great. And I have him on now. I call him all the time, which is really weird.
So, was there, going into being in middle school and starting to write for the paper, before that, was it just simply like, I'm into books, I like to read papers, or was it like, no, I want to be a writer? Like,
no, it's I liked news. Like I hear from a lot of other people who like get into journalism is that they want to be writers, like they like literature, they like books, they want to write fiction or stories or long form essays and things. I am not a great writer. I've been a journalist for more than 7 years now, and longer if you count the time as a student. But I will never profess to be a skilled writer. My scribemanship is workmanlike, is how I would describe it. It's okay. It has. I have structures. I have flourishes I know I can use. I can spin an emotional tale if I give you the right facts.
So, in other words, you wanted to write the news. You wanted to tell the news.
I wanted to
report.
I wanted to report. Yeah, I like the reporting more so than any other part of it. So for me, the format can just be whatever. I just want them to get the news out there.
And did you continue to do that in high school?
I took a detour into documentary video. So in a way,
very similar rail. You jumped over to that rail.
Yeah, I went to Wallenberg High School first, and then to Soda, where much like the Marina bifurcation, right, where I was watching people with different kinds of lives, I really experienced it. Like Wallenberg High School is right behind the kind of Geary Mall there, like where the Toys R Us used to be, the Mervyn's.
I think I can see it out my window, to be honest. It's right here.
It's a popular skater spot.
Yeah,
I'm sure you see skaters there all the time,
especially now. But yeah,
I would imagine. and you know, it's, at least when I went there, it was there was something like 600 students, and I think the number of white students could be counted on one hand.
Oh wow!
And because I'm mixed, and because there's a code switch thing that happens, I was one of them. Like I'm brown skinned, and most white people perceive me as non-white. But in a school filled with mostly Chinese kids, Mexican kids, and a smattering of black kids, I was the white guy. And so, especially because I don't speak with, even though I grew up with people who do speak with like more like, I don't know how you'd put it, like urban affectations, yo, what's up? I don't speak like that. And so I guess I got pegged as the white guy. And then I jumped to school, the Arts High School, where I did documentary video. And all of a sudden, my brown skin was a lot more visible because everyone around me was either white or Chinese. And, and then they were like, hey, who's that brown guy? And I was like, who?
Who? What are you talking about? I'm Joe Fitzgerald. I don't know what you're talking about.
I'm Joseph Arthur William Fitzgerald. Hi.
What kind of documentaries were you making in high school? I'm curious.
Oh, gosh. What did I make? I did some on homelessness. I did one on a friend who was on that turned into more of an experimental kind of deal was almost like a sound and visual texture film about a friend who was on different types of antidepressants and kind of seeing and imagining things. I worked that I started just as I was getting out of high school on a feature-length documentary as an editor, a video editor, on a documentary about kind of kids growing up in San Francisco and Oakland who kind of were either touched by or perpetrated gang violence, and then decided to pull away from that life and scene by embracing music, mostly hip hop.
Okay.
And yeah, stuff like that. It was fun.
Everything, all those stories that you just mentioned sounded journalistic to me. They really do, right? That. It's reportorial, if you will.
Yeah, and that's how I kind of came around the bend back. Just like you're saying, it was very much the same. So, at one point in City College, I'm somehow, I forget how it happened, met this fellow by the name of Alex Emsley. And Alex Emsley was the editor of the City College paper, The Guardsman. And I was in my early 20s and kind of taking too long at City College, not really sure what I wanted to do, and working 2 different jobs while also taking classes so I could pay my rent. And also including editing that documentary, which took a few years. And he said, "Hey, do you want to do video for our college newspaper?" And I said, "Sure." He said, "Well, okay, we also need some coverage of this rally downtown. Can you do that?" I'm like, "Sure. I've done that in life, I guess, as a child." And Alex was my first editor, and he was my editor at the City College newspaper, The Guardsman. And now that I'm joining KQED this week, he is an editor at KQED.
Full circle, small world, tiny world of San Francisco.
Tiny world of San Francisco. Me and Alex Emsley will be reporting again.
So was that assignment? Is that what got you back? Got you back into journalism?
Yeah, City College's journalism department is great because there's no structure. It's so fucking loosey goosey. You're just fucking doing it. You're just doing it. They're like, here, journalism is when you write things and it's news and it's true and you write it at the top, and that's called lead. And now you know enough. You know enough.
Right.
Go out there. I'm shoving you this way and go report some things. And in a few months, you get the hang of it. And all the students are running the show, and the students are between 20 and 50. I had former investment banker classmates who were on midlife crises and I'm going to discover journalism, and single moms and veterans. And
you've seen the show. You've seen the show Community, right?
Oh, hell yeah. It was very much like that. It's very much like that. It's so, you had versions of all those people, and it's such a motley crew, and it teaches you so much. It's so amazing.
When they sent you out the way that they would they give you press badges at least?
Yeah.
Okay, good. Okay.
Hell yeah.
It's not just fight your way to the front. It's
no, but they're basically you are a person with interest in journalism. I will teach you the barest bones of basics. Now go do it 20 times, and then we'll teach you how to really do it.
I mean, that kind of works.
Yeah, it totally works. It absolutely works. It has totally changed how I view teaching, because I was at the time a artist in residence at School of the Arts High School, where I attended.
Right.
And I had just started when I was, I think, 20. And so I was teaching kids some of whom were my classmates and some of whom were not, in video editing techniques, both technical and theoretical. Here's the program and how to teach yourself the program. And then also, here is the concepts of why you make certain edits. Here's contrasting 2 different scenes in order to make a point, to juxtapose them, right? Here's why you might want to linger on a shot versus cutting very quickly. Here's where you might want to use a close-up versus a long shot. Why would you use that longer, wider take that you have like the concepts behind it.
Right.
And I structure, yeah, instead of the technical. And I would structure the classes in terms of when these concepts were pioneered in film history. So we'd start with like silence and like the silent era and no edits. And then we go to D.W. Griffith's Birth of a Nation and like, oh, all right, here's the first time we see a close-up really popularized. And also D.W. Griffith is a racist bastard. But this is the first time we see a close-up. Let's talk about both. And then, but I was very influenced by that City College class that taught me journalism so easily later on. And so I changed my workshops at SOTA, which I'd already been doing for a few years. And or 2 years maybe at that point. And I was like, okay, you know what? Let's teach you a concept and just throw you out there and you just go do it. And then we'll talk more about what that concept is and means once you're back and we review everything. And it worked really well. Those kids became so, and I'm not trying to like, put myself up, but like the concept worked so well. The kids were so well prepared and practiced making movies so much that by the time they went to college, they were like running circles around their college peers, and it was amazing.
I mean,
one of my students, by the way, was Joe Talbot, the director of Last Black Man in San Francisco, and it's amazing that some of them went so far and some of them did so much. I just love that.
That was Joe Fitzgerald Rodriguez. Check back Thursday for part 2, when Joe will tell us all about his life as a professional journalist covering San Francisco. Music for Storied San Francisco is by Otis McDonald. Photography is by Michelle Kilfeather. The show is hosted and produced by me, Jeff Hunt. Our website is storiedsf.com, where you can browse more than 100 episodes and help support us by buying merch from our store. Also, for a limited time, we're giving 50% of our proceeds to the Give to SF Fund, which helps out San Franciscans in need during the coronavirus shelter-in-place. Please follow us on Twitter and Instagram, and subscribe to the show wherever you listen to podcasts. If you see an option to rate and review what we do, we'd sure appreciate it. And if you have any feedback or people you think should be on the podcast, our email is storiedsf@gmail.com. Thanks for listening. Stay healthy and stay safe.